Good afternoon to everyone and welcome to this presentation, Name Change Your Perspective, View Your Network Like a Hacker. This presentation will be held by Scott Register. Scott Register has more than 25 years of experience leading product management and go-to-market activities for global technology companies. In his current role, he is tasked with bringing new security solutions to market across Keysight's broad solution portfolio. Good afternoon, Scott.
Hi, everyone. My name's Scott Register. I'm VP of Security Solutions here at Keysight. Thank you for joining me
Period
today.
of question at the end of the presentation, and Scott will be with us to answer your questions. So you can go ahead, Scott, with your presentation now. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name's Scott Register. I'm VP of Security Solutions here at Keysight. Thank you for joining me today. And in today's presentation, I would like to invite you to think about network security differently, to maybe take a different perspective on securing your network than you have before. And that specifically is viewing your network the way an attacker would, rather than sort of the way that we always have. So if we step back and look at the risks facing networks today, right? Let's think about what they really are. Misconfiguration is a huge source of breaches, and there's lots of independent research from Verizon and Gartner and others, and that's because it's very, very difficult to always configure all of your security tools at the right time. And this is in part because we've stacked up a lot of these security tools, software, and hardware solutions because there are evolving threats that we're always trying to sort of stay ahead of. And we've deployed a lot of point solutions, right? Oh, there's some new threat type. I'm worried about data exfiltration. I'm worried about ransomware. I'm worried about something else. And so you're sort of piling up all of these tools, run typically by very limited staff. And so you're trying to stay ahead of all the sort of millions of SIEM alerts that you're getting. And you have to get all of this stuff, these dozens of security tools, all configured exactly correctly every single day. And the hackers, of course, only have to be right once. And if they're right once, they're into your network. And so how have we typically responded, right? We've bought and deployed, as I said, dozens, sometimes over 100 different security tools on the network. Now, at Keysight, our background is testing. I mean, we're the largest test and measurement company in the world. We've been doing security testing for about 2 decades. And because of this, we know that most of the security tools out there, most of the tools that people buy and deploy, whether it's the endpoint protection software, firewalls, IDS, IPS, et cetera, are actually pretty good if used and configured correctly. But most of the tools out there are actually able to stop breaches. And so this poses a real question. If everyone has security tools, and they do, right? No one hooks up to the internet without a firewall or without endpoint protection software, things like that. And if those tools are pretty good, why is it that there are new, kind of ransomware breaches, new attacks in the headline every single day? And that's really the question that we set out to answer, because we're good at security. We didn't want to build another firewall or IDS or endpoint solution if there's lots of good ones out there, right? And one of the big challenges as we looked at this is that security traditionally has been very hard to measure, right? I mean, we buy all these tools and we deploy them and we set them up, but at the end of the day, can you answer the question, am I safer today than I was yesterday or last week or last month or last year, right? We typically can't answer that because we can't measure it. And as Peter Drucker famously remarked, you can't manage what you can't measure. And so we're faced with all of these questions. I spent this money, I closed this ticket. Am I safer? Did that new piece of technology I bought, did that really help me? Did that make me safer? I'm thinking about deploying a new solution. What's the return on my investment going to be if I deploy SOAR or I deploy some new EDR solution? If maybe I'm a security analyst or I'm a CISO and I'm going for more budget, how do I justify that? I may think intuitively, oh, I need another solution for something. But if I can't demonstrate an ROI, then how am I going to justify, that additional budget? So these are all the kind of questions that we simply haven't been able to answer. And that means we don't know if at the end of the day, we're just throwing all that money away. We're probably not, but we really don't know because we can't prove and we can't measure and we can't manage all this. And so this is a really fundamental kind of challenge in security, is that with this view that we've always had of the network and of network security, we aren't able to gauge our effectiveness. We buy lots of tools and we get lots of alerts from them, so we think we're doing something good, but we aren't able to demonstrate progress. I'd like to propose that part of the challenge here is that we've taken sort of fundamentally the wrong view. We view the network, of course, and our security status from the perspective of a defender. Now, what does this mean? This means we've deployed these solutions and we've got all these dashboards and we've got a SIEM that all the alerts bubble up to, and we spend all day looking at the things that we've blocked, looking at the log messages and alerts from things like that. And what do those indicate? Those indicate things, malicious activities, break-in attempts, etc., that we've seen on our network. So that's great, and letting us know, hey, I deployed this solution and I'm stopping stuff. But really, is that what we need to focus on? Is the stuff that we've already taken care of, the stuff that we've already blocked? Maybe it would really be more effective to take the attacker's view of the network, because the attacker isn't going to focus on, oh, what are the things that you can block? The attacker is going to focus on, what are the things that you don't see, right? How can I sneak in? Once I'm inside a network, can I move laterally? Can I move from system to system? What can I do that's low and slow that maybe gets around their defenses? Once I'm inside the network, of course, I don't just want to, let's say, encrypt your hard drives. I want to steal data because I'm going to threaten to sell it. Can I sneak data out of the network? Can I exfiltrate it? If maybe I want to steal customer information from your web server, right? And I want to steal credit card numbers and contact information, all of that stuff. Can I mount a SQL injection attack against your web services and extract that information? If I want to get onto your network, maybe you've got a great corporate firewall and it's hard to get through that. Maybe I should target home users, since everyone's working from home now. Maybe I can send them a phishing email or an email with a malicious attachment. They're not behind the firewall. I can get malware onto their laptop at home, and then from that, I can cross into the network. So that's the view that an attacker would take of your network. It's not what are you able to block, it's what are you missing? What are all the things that you can't see that a hacker is going to do when they try to get into your network? And that's the view that I think we collectively, as people who are defending networks, should take of network security. And so recently, we launched a tool that lets you do exactly that. Now, as I said, we've been doing security testing for roughly 2 decades. And historically, who we sold to were like the internet security gateway vendors, all the firewall vendors and proxies and IDS and IPS and things like that. And they were really built, for sort of laboratory use, like used in QA labs. Well, what we've done is we've taken all that realism and our library of tens of thousands of attacks and things like that, and we've packaged it up in a way that you can safely attack your own network with real malware and real tactics and techniques and procedures used by hackers to try to break into the network safely. And by doing that, you can see how well defended you are. When I tried this particular attack, am I able to block it? Does it get flagged as suspicious? And it does trigger an alert, but I'm not able to block it, which maybe means I need to do some configuration, maybe on my SIEM, or does it fly past completely undetected and I'm just blind to it, right? That's what we let you do, is actually attack your network, real malware and real attacks, and find out what you're protected from and what you're not. So that when the CISO wants to say, hey, I read about an attack, one of our competitors, one of our partners got breached, APT 29 went after a company across town, and they ended up paying $6 million. Do we have to worry about that? You want to be able to say, oh no, I tested our network against that attack Tuesday, and guess what? We're safe. We're safe from it. And this way, whether it's your corporate LAN, your cloud, your users at home, you want to understand how good your security is at protecting them and alerting you about attacks. That's exactly what we'll tell you. And so now you can measure your security over time and see where your critical exposures are and maybe where your low priority ones are. Get remediation instructions for when we do see something that you aren't able to stop, and then go fix those. And when you fix them, you see your security score, your security improving over time. So you can now demonstrate, hey, a year ago, maybe we were down in the 50s. We weren't protected against this. We maybe didn't have visibility into encrypted attacks, and we weren't doing a very good job of blocking data exfiltration if someone did get on the network. And now we're way up here. We're in the low 90s. We fixed all these things. We have a little bit of exposure, but it's under control, and we're on top of this. So now you can measure and demonstrate it. Now, one of the things that we tried to do, one of the things I referenced earlier was no one has like too many security analysts, right? No one has too many people on their IT security team who get to run around and fix problems, right? So anything that we do, we want to make sure we're not adding a lot of workload. And so we actually built Threat Simulator as a SaaS product. So all of the management, that's in the cloud. You don't have to deploy any kind of management software. And as you know, in the typical attack, there's two endpoints. There's the attacker and the victim. Well, in our default deployment, we deploy all the attackers. We host them out in a dark cloud, so you don't have to worry about that. You just deploy a couple of little lightweight agents on the inside of your network, and we'll conduct the assessments against them. Back to the safety thing, because I know there's a question that often comes up. Our agents can only talk to each other, okay? So there's no real service exposed. There's no real application server that we'll talk to. When we simulate the behavior of malware, let's say on an endpoint, that behavior is simulated. We actually catch malware, we detonate it in a sandbox, and we watch how it behaves, watch the system calls, the network calls, and what files it touches, registry mods, things like that. And then when we're emulating the malware on, let's say, a desktop, we'll do all those behaviors, but it's not the actual malware that's running those. So you don't have to worry about like some infection getting loose on the inside of your network. So it's easy to deploy, it's safe, and it will tell you exactly where your exposures are and help you optimize your security tools, spot drift, optimize your SIEM, so that when this and this and this happen, that's an attack that you need to worry about and that you need to go address. Now, it's important that if you're trying to secure your network, that you sort of cover all of your bases, right? You've got digital assets everywhere. In the cloud, you may have moved your web services to the cloud. You're, of course, concerned about the traditional LAN perimeter. As we've learned from things like the SolarWinds breach, even really good perimeter security isn't going to protect you from everything. You might have a supply chain weakness, a BYOD device. There are ways that something bad can happen inside your network. So you want to find out post-breach, can malware move from place to place? Like the hackers have free roam. It's an interesting statistic. The average dwell time, which is how long a hacker can stay active in your network before detection, is around 287 days now. So on average, a hacker is active in your network for 6 months before they're detected. Think about how much damage someone can do on the inside of your network in 6 months. Email is the most common way that that breaches are initiated, right? Phishing emails or malicious attachments. And so we can do things like validate your email security. If I send you an email with a malicious attachment, does it get through your email security system, or does your email block the email or strip it? And of course, endpoint is always critical. We're adding new attacks practically every day. If you're familiar with the MITRE attack framework, you can just literally go choose like the APTs, the threat actors that you're concerned about. pick their attacks, apply those to your network, and run a series of assessments to find out, do I need to worry about this? Am I protected those? And I show just like a subset of the tactics that we support. So your endpoint security product, whatever it is you've deployed, we're able to evaluate it and find out, how effective it is at detecting and at blocking attacks. So what are some typical use cases for when when people get a lot of value from a threat simulator, which is in the category that like analysts call breach and attack simulation? So what are some of the common times that customers see a lot of value from this? Anytime you make a big technology change, let's say you've changed firewall vendors, right, from brand A to brand B, or you've done something like a major software or firmware update, or one of the use cases that certainly has come up a lot with our customers, if you're moving from on-prem web services, like traditionally maybe you've hosted applications in your data center, and so they're behind a like a traditional web application firewall from, there's lots of brands, Imperva and Big F5, there's good WAFs out there to protect them. But maybe when you move to the cloud, you don't take that vendor with you, and now you're using the cloud native, like the CSP provided web application protections. Well, the configuration for those is going to be very, very different. Configuring a firewall is relatively straightforward, right? It sort of blocks everything, and then you're just allowing specific services, and it's really sort of enforcing sort of good internet hygiene for a lot of your users. But WAF configuration can be much trickier because you have to do a lot of configuration that's sort of specific to the application that you're running. Well, we can try lots of different attacks, again, safely, just talking to our own agent that's deployed on that segment. We can try lots of different attacks through your WAF to let you know, oh yeah, you're still vulnerable to this, whether it's SQL injection or some other encryption attack or something like that, and then let you know how to fix it. Now, of course, despite everyone's efforts, breaches do occur, and so after the fact, one of the important things you want to make sure of is, hey, I got hit by this. It was really bad. I want to be very sure that it can never happen again. And so you can go back after the fact and simulate, like run those attacks again after you think you've implemented some remediation, and make sure, yes, in fact, now I'm safe. I was at risk before, they got in, now I'm protected. And so you can go back and make those changes the same way that I will go back and fix the changing of postmortem after this presentation. And then last, being proactive about security is very important, right? One of the things that we often find is that security teams don't get to see an attack on their network until it's in the rearview mirror, meaning they this even happened like on our network when we did an early beta test. You may not know what an attack looks like in terms of sort of its traces, its signatures, what shows up on the SIEM. And so you may just see some sort of random uncorrelated events, but because you didn't know that that was a particular attack, you don't know what to do with that information. Well, we give you the opportunity to run a real attack on your network and see exactly what it's going to look like when it happens. And in fact, we even give you a ladder diagram. So we show, for every attack. So we show you exactly what network connections are made from where to where, and what the contents are, and what the protocol is, so that not only can you optimize things like your SIEM to write rules to go find when stuff happens, but your security team now has experience with that attack. So when it happens for real, and inevitably it will, they've seen it before. They know how to react. They know how to respond. So Threat Simulator is part of our security operations suite, which is a set of products that we've designed specifically to help security analysts continually measure and improve their security operations and their effectiveness. Threat Simulator, you heard about today, and that's where we let you safely conduct real attacks against your network to find misconfigurations, configuration drift. Either you made a configuration change or the security landscape changed, And so now you are at risk, and so you can continually improve it. We also have a product called Threat Armor, sorry, that is a threat intelligence gateway. So one of the challenges, again, something I mentioned earlier, is that most of the time we get way too many security alerts to deal with every day, right? So some of them just go uninspected. I mean, it's not uncommon to get over 1 million security alerts a day. We've got a massive database, tens of millions of sites that we know and prove every single day are bad, are trying to do brute force password attacks, are phishing sites, are botnet controllers, etc. And so we block all the traffic to and from those sites. Or if there's geographies like countries where you simply don't do business, why would you let them on your network? And so we found that by cutting out all of those known bad sites, we're able to reduce the number of security alerts that you get by up to 80%. And you can imagine, if you can reduce the malicious connections that cause security alerts by 80%, that gives you a lot more time to deal with other issues. So hopefully this was helpful. Now, we would be happy to talk about this in your environment and give you a more an actual personalized demo. So I've listed contact info of our local rep, Puyan, here on screen. Feel free to send him an email, or you can also come to the Keysight website, get more information about this. All right. Thank you very much for your time. I hope this has been useful, and have a great day. Goodbye.
Well, thank you, Scott, for this excellent presentation. It was very, we learned a lot on your presentation, and it's now on the QA session, so we do have time. I think we have 15 minutes now left for the questions. Okay. So to anyone you have on your web page, you have a question and chat window, so don't hesitate to ask any question. But I would like to ask you first one question for you, Scott. Mm-hmm. And how is this different from penetration testing? If I'm already doing pen testing, does this add any value?
That is a great question, actually, and one of the more common ones that we get. So penetration testing, first of all, I'll say it's a good thing. I'm certainly not saying people should not do pen testing, but it's important to remember what the goals of penetration testing are and how it's carried out. Typically, for a pen test, you bring in an outside team, and they try different ways to sort of get in your network and get to maybe some piece of data. And so what are some of the techniques that they might use? They may do, typically modern pen test teams will do things like a lot of social engineering. Maybe they get the name of the CFO and they find out that the CFO has children who are on a soccer team, and they find out the name of the soccer team and the coach, and they'll spoof an email from the soccer coach about who's on the donut schedule or something like that, in an attempt to get the CFO to download an email and open some kind of malicious attachment. Pen testing now, good pen test teams will often do things like physical access, maybe pull up in an unmarked van in the office parking lot and try to hack their way onto Wi-Fi, right? So those are completely valid things to do, but they're not exhaustive, right? They aren't scanning all of your defenses. They're really just, looking at a few things, and typically once they find a path in, they stop and pursue that. And so they don't tell you about other weaknesses that you might have. They're typically not repeatable. So what a team finds in January may be very different from what a team finds in July. And so that makes it very difficult to do things like understand your trends over time. And they're, they tell you about your security at a particular point in time. How is my security that week? But obviously your configuration changes. You may add, you change firewall policies, or you add a new branch office, or you connect to a business partner. The threat landscape changes all the time, right? And so what someone finds, last week may not represent your status today. So a breach and attack simulation tool, a good one, like Threat Simulator, has a different outcome, right? Because it's very much trying to be reproducible or repeatable, so that you can run the same tests, or basically updated tests every day or week or whenever, so you have a really good idea of how your security is trending, and assigning a numeric value to that, so you can see, oh, I was at 62 last year, but I implemented these changes and now I'm at 97, but maybe there's drift and something happened and then it dropped down to the 80s. So you want to be able to establish a trend over time. You want it reproducible, and understand sort of every day or every week where your security is, and be exhaustive, right? You want to be able to, if you've got firewall, IDS, WAF, endpoint security, you want to exercise all of those, so that you're doing a really comprehensive assessment of your security, and not just focusing on sort of one tool and then having a lot of blind spots maybe that you're not accounting for. So
Okay.
that great question, but it's a very they are complementary,
Yeah.
I would say.
Okay, thank you. We do have another question though, and it's coming with the cloud services. So with the threat simulator, does it work with any cloud services, or only internal biz app using cloud services?
So if I'm understanding the question correctly, you can definitely use it with cloud services. In fact, one of the I mentioned this in the presentation. One of the most frequent times that we see customers adopt, use of a tool like Threat Simulator, is when they're undergoing some sort of significant technology transition, and especially in the security space. One of the really big changes that we see customers make is if you've historically hosted like web services on-prem, right, in a data center, and you've got Imperva or F5 or some other sort of WAF vendor that you've been using as your protection for those. In many cases, when we see customers move to the cloud for their deployments, they also transition their protection model, often to the cloud native services, to Google IDS or Azure WAF, or whatever it is, depending on the service. And not making any sort of value judgment about the different services, but we just see that very common. You've moved to a CSP and you're using their sort of native protection services because they integrate well with that your app deployment. Well, configuring a WAF or web services protection can be fairly complicated. It's actually much more complicated than, let's say, firewall configuration, where you've got sort of standard settings and you allow web services and you block viruses, right? And so making sure that you get that right and that you're well protected from SQL injection and SSL attacks and things like that is actually pretty complicated, right? And so we definitely see many cases where, when a customer is going through that transition, they have this goal of wanting to say, hey, I'm using this new set of security tools, very different configuration model, different security model. How can I have assurance now that my assets are protected, and that I'm continuously validating that, and that I've sort of gotten everything right? So absolutely, from our perspective, we don't care if you're talking about a home user connecting over a VPN or LAN or data center or a cloud. You can absolutely validate your protection of any of those. But that cloud migration is a really kind of common first step that or sort of driving force between a customer threat simulator deployment.
Okay, yeah. So we still have minutes left. So I do have another question for you, Scott. The third one is, how quickly or how often do you release malware updates?
Oh, so good question. Our typical cadence right now is about every 2 weeks, although we do have quick turn, like when there's sort of new, more urgent attacks. but within, let's see, what is today is the 27th. Yeah, within just a few weeks, we'll actually have a, you heard it here first. We haven't announced this, but we're moving to a daily release service, right? Where we basically have a, a curated feed, a priority threat mitigation, we call it, where sort of every day we're looking at, the threats that are actually active on the internet, like things that are popping up that you need to be worried about, like today. You really need to validate your protection against today. And you can't do everything because there's over nearly 300,000 new total malware variants out there every day, but only a few of those are really active, right? And so we'll have a feed so you can every single day validate, especially your endpoint protection against those. So good question. Thanks.
Okay. And I think we do have time for at least one. What protections do I have from your testing causing real security problems?
Oh, good question and a valid one. That's certainly a question I would ask. Okay, so a couple of things. When you're doing endpoint protection, I'll break this up into network, endpoint, and email. The endpoint protection, this is where we're validating security of your endpoint controls, SentinelOne or CrowdStrike or whatever. We're not actually using malware. We have a framework where we internally detonate malware and we observe all of its behavior. What registry mods, what system calls does it make, what network connections, what files does it touch or open, or things like that. And then our software emulates those activities on the client. So there's no, now we recommend that you use it on, kind of a golden image, laptop or VM or something like that, rather than, on a user's workstation, because it might be intrusive, but there is no active malware, right? So we're not actually gonna break anything. For the email validation, we recommend that you set up a dummy account that logs in and tests, because we will send real malicious attachments, and we wanted to make sure that a user doesn't inadvertently open one. So we strongly recommend you not use a real user when you're sending malicious emails. You just set up a dedicated account for this. That's the safest and easiest to do. And then for the network controls, we do send live malware, right? We will simulate, let's say, an end user receiving a phishing email, clicking on a link, and then downloading malware, from the cloud. We do transmit live malware because what you're validating is your gateway, your firewall, typically firewall or proxies, ability to detect and remove or block malware from that, download. But we only talk to ourselves. Like, our agents can only communicate with each other. We can't communicate with a real service, or we an actual user on a laptop can't talk to one of our agents to download malware. And so by doing that, we make sure, and then when we receive malware, we don't write it to disk. We delete it immediately, like in memory. So it sort of dissolves upon receipt. So it's never actually received and active on the endpoint. And so by doing that, by only talking to ourselves, and by shredding the file as it comes in, we make sure that there's never any exposure from that malware on that endpoint, because it never actually exists on the endpoint that's receiving it, right? So that's something we're obviously very we have built with a very high level of confidence and sort of assurance that there's no possibility of something bad happening on your network, because you're doing security testing.
Okay. And I think we do have time for another question. And I think this question is regarding the Industry 4.0, the merging between the operational technology and information technology, so data sharing between OT and IT. So the question is, was it tried on an OT network?
Okay, so this is a good question. So right now, so does it work on an OT network? Yeah, absolutely. So we validated that. Now we haven't added a lot of sort of OT specific malware. And it's sort of interesting that most of our customers, we've also found to be very hesitant at deploying any kind of active security validation on a dedicated OT network. That's just, people seem averse to that, which is fine, and they rely more on things like IPS, right, or IDS, really, to detect things going on. That being said, if you look at the more significant breaches recently, which have impacted OT networks, so I'll just take JBS and Colonial Pipeline, right? So those are two sort of recent high-profile ones. The actual attacks used in those instances were IT-based attacks, but we see that they impact the OT network, right? And just by by a huge degree, that the attacks out there are against IT. And so understanding, being able to obviously reduce or defend yourself and validate that defense against things like lateral movement are very important. Can you stop malware going from one to the other? But still, the most effective way today to prevent compromise of your OT network is by better protection of your IT assets, because overwhelmingly the attack vector, the thing that comes in that hurts your OT network, is going to come in on the IT side. Now, we're also doing a lot of work, and obviously, Keysight's very, very active, and we're one of the biggest sort of 5G validation companies in the world, and we've got a huge sort of IoT business and things like that. So that's a space we're very interested in, active in, and we're doing a lot of threat research. But in terms of most networks, where should they spend their money on protection validation? It's going to be on the IT side, because that's where their threats are more likely going to come from.
It was a very interesting question, because we do see a lot of merging between the OT and IT, and now we do have a lot of communication between those two technology, or those two kind of network. So it's very interesting to see that it's important to take care of the IT to not impact the OT, and vice
Right.
versa. It's very interesting.
Yeah. And we actually, just one other point, we actually just released, I guess 2 weeks ago, an IoT security assessment product, which is designed specifically to validate the security of connected devices, pipelines, controllers, and thermostats, and healthcare devices, and cars, and things like that, because
Right.
it's a somewhat different model. And so we are certainly very interested in that space, but the way that you validate the security is a little different for those.
Okay. And I'm saying we still have time, because it's 1:07, so we do have time.
Okay.
So I guess another question would be, how much load do you put on the network with your tools?
Negligible. I mean, you like, for Threat Simulator, you can run this during peak hours during the day. I mean, it's about the load of imposed by one user with a browser, right? So most of the things like the downloads are pretty small, maybe a few hundred K. So it's not a volumetric attack, right? We certainly have tools that can do volumetric attacks and high volume things. You would typically not use those in a production network while it's handling traffic. Typically, you if you're going to do that kind of attack, you do it pre-deployment. And so we have tools like Breaking Point that are done for that, for lab testing and pre-validation. But once you're on the production network using Threat Simulator, you're not gonna. I mean, it will be a blip in terms of load. Like, say, it's like one user downloading one file is about what you'll see.
Okay. Just before we left, is it easy to have an eval copy?
Yes, absolutely. Anyone can get a 2-week free trial, and we'll be happy to help you get started. The best way, and I think everyone will have access to the slides. Our local sales rep, Puyan, his contact info is there on the last slide. Easiest thing to do is just reach out to him. His mobile number, email address, all that is there, and we will absolutely get you set up with an evaluation. No problem.
Yeah, and if
Yeah,
anyone need more information regarding the eval copy, they can go on the partner section on the website, and they click on Keysight, and I guess they can ask the question and ask, and you will be able to help them to get the eval copy.
Yep. Well, and it's a SaaS product, so it's if you stop and get a cup of coffee, it'll take you 30 minutes to get started.
Okay.
Right? So it's pretty easy.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you so much, Scott. That was an excellent presentation. We do learn a lot, and it was interesting to have this different perspective of viewing the network. So I guess that's it. Thanks a lot, Scott, and have a good ending day.
Same to you.
Thank
you
you
for your time. Take care.
Thanks.
Bye.